my ball. You go, what do you mean your ball? It landed in my seat. You're going, but the seats were empty. It's my seat. That's my, and she's freaking out. And now all the fans are watching you and not watching the guy trotting the bases anymore. Ultimately, the dad takes the ball from, it was the dad, takes the ball from the little kid and gives it to her, and she storms back to her seat. Meanwhile, she's being booed by everybody in the stand. It's made media history with how many people have looked at this. Now, you're that person, that good parent. And in the article, they said, why did you give? There's no rule, folks, who owns the ball. Why did you give the ball to her after giving it to your son? Because I wanted her just to go away. At your table, you're the good parent. And you've got this person going, screaming and spitting in your face. And the picture of the little kid is just like that, hiding behind dad, going, what is going on here? You're the good, in all honesty, knowing you as you know you, how would you have responded? You got a couple minutes. Go. Here we go. Personally, I think all of us would have handled that different than the person next to it. Here's what I would have done. He's my kid. She wants your ball. Fight her. When we deal with stress, conflict, there's 4 basic responses. There's the fight response. Have you heard of that? Where when I watched the video, in all honesty, I could just subconsciously feel my fists tightening up, okay, as I'm watching this. There's the flight. You just turn and you run. Then there's the freeze. You don't know what to do. So you're blah, 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 blah. Then there's the fawn method, F-A-W-N, where you give in to the person, just try to make them happy so they go away or the situation diffuses. You could argue there's pros and cons with all of those. We're talking about the 4th method today, the fawn method, which is a people-pleasing method that in the midst of stress or conflict, it's not a matter of right or wrong. I just want it to what? Go away. So we're in our Bibles here, Acts 25, if you would turn there. We're looking at a dude called Festus. Festus, he's a people pleaser. He's a people pleaser. Some of you are notorious people pleasers, and you know that about yourself. And we know people who are people pleasers. And all of us have attempted to diffuse a situation and make people happy. We're talking about obsessive people pleasing. It really comes down to what is your motive. So we're in Paul's Odyssey, part 3. We're wrapping up his missionary journey, his 3rd missionary journey this month. We'll be done with this series. Remember, Paul has, on this particular journey, 2,500 miles, approximately 5 years. That's a long time to be away from home for any reason. He's been beaten. He's been thrown in jail. He's been called names. He's been on trial. Being a Christian's not always easy, and it's all about how you respond. We talked about this a week or so ago. You either react or you respond. React is always self-defensive. That was my fist doubling up. Respond is where your character takes over. And today you're either a reactor or you're a responder. You're responding the way God wants you to, or you're reacting the way you want to. Can you relate to that at all? Yeah, and you don't always have notice that some little old lady's going to accost you. So we introduced this portion of our journey last week, chapter 24, 25, 26. Today is chapter 25. We said we see Paul encountering 3 Roman officials, 3 different situations, 3 different individuals. Last week, he dealt with what we call a procurator, who is, we call him a governor. Sometimes he's referred to as a governor, but there's a distinct difference in the Bible between a person who is a governor, a Roman governor, and a person who's a Roman procurator. A procurator is just an official. They're a politician. That's all they are. The governor is a military person and has military might at their disposal. Pilate was a, what do you think? Governor. This guy, Felix, and the guy we're looking at last week, this week, Festus, was the other type, just a Roman official, a career diplomat. We in America might know them. Next week, we're going to finish up with Festus. We'll also look at a guy that enters the scene called King Agrippa II, because the 2 of them then deal with Paul. Here's a couple take-home thoughts from last week in case you weren't here, as we looked at Felix, who was a procrastinator. Felix was a procrastinator. He put everything off. He only dealt with it if he had to. All of us do that, but we're talking obsessively. And really, what he put off was his salvation. He was fine with being around Jesus and fine with being around Paul, but he wasn't going to take it personally. And unfortunately, churches are full of people like that. They're fine with going to church. They're fine with being religious, coming Easter or Christmas or many times in between. They're fine with dropping their kids off, fine with having a cup of coffee, but they'll never take Jesus personally. They think they're saved. They hope they're saved. They look like they're saved, but they're not, because they do not have a personal relationship with Christ. All they have is religion. So the thought last week, and that we asked you to really carefully examine your life, are you a religious person or are you a follower of Jesus? Because watch, if I'm a follower of Jesus, I can't stay where I am. I have to follow. That's implicit in the word. I have to live my life like him. I have to do the things that he wants me to do. I cannot just come to church, be the same person I am the other 6 days of the week, and have church and my faith and God and the Holy Spirit have no influence in my life. It's another option that you put into your life, being a religious person. We want you to be followers of Christ, which means you cannot stay who you are. Your life must be transformed slowly, but there has to be a noticeable change in your actions, in your attitudes, in your affections, and in your ambitions in life. The other thing is, are you procrastinating a decision that God has given you? So, there's a few people, especially last week we had some visitors, people who are not Christians. They are religious people. Some just aren't even religious and they were here. But the question is this: are you procrastinating? Are you putting off this decision for Jesus for a better day, for a rainy day, for the end of life? Well, that's all good if it works out for you. Life doesn't always play by your rules. What if you die before you put your faith and trust in Christ? What if you say no to God one too many times and ultimately it's no? People go, well, that doesn't sound like a good guy. Well, think about a girl or a guy who you're in love with and you want to get married to, and you say, I'd like to get married, and they say, not ready, not yet, I'm thinking about it. We call that a lack of commitment. Wouldn't you say that? Doesn't there come a time when the other person just looks at them and in their mind they assess, you're never going to commit to me? Yes? And what do? Do you stay with them? Fool, would you? No, you move on with life. There's a time when God looks at you and says, your heart has shriveled up worse than the Scrooge. No more. And God just turns and removes his hand of blessing on your life. That can happen. So last week, are you a procrastinator? It could be God's asking you to serve somewhere in your church. God's asking you to share your faith with somebody that he's been bringing their name through your memory. It could be that he's asking you to just help somebody out in some capacity. And we always say, when I have time. So that was the key take-homes from last week. You're in chapter 25. Look at the last verse of verse 24, if you would, verse 27. I'm reading from the New Living Translation today. In verse 27, we saw a transition in the authority over Paul's situation. He's been arrested for doing nothing. The Jews just don't like him. This event takes place in about the year 59 or 60. We're not quite sure what month, anything like that. So if you think 59, so you do the year 2025, subtract 59 from that, you're going to see how many years ago this was. It's a historical event. It takes place in a city. This is a reenactment, if you will, artist's rendering of what Caesarea Maritima would have been like back in the day of Paul, back in the day of Jesus. One of the most marvelous cities ever constructed, and it was constructed by, take a guess, Herod the Great. He is the first person ever in history. He built this magnificent harbor here, created cement with cement walls and breakers. First person ever to use cement in the ocean and create a harbor. This hippodrome is amazing. You cannot believe how big that is. And that's where they would do their chariot races and things like that. This theater is still in existence here. This was the main palace where the person who ruled, the Roman who ruled over Judea, the southern part of Israel, this is where he stayed. Well, why not? You're on the coast. Wouldn't you want to stay on the coast as opposed to up in a mountain somewhere? And it was pretty much a Roman city. They didn't have to deal with all the squabbling of the Jews. They just had to have about an hour commute to get there to Jerusalem. So this is where it takes place. Now, one of my favorite things when we get here, we always park over here. We come in, we wander through this when we do tours and stuff. Then we walk up here, walk down this pathway here, and right here is the remains of this massive palace that had been built there. And one of the intriguing things I'm going to talk about is what is right there. Quit wiggling. We'll look at that in a moment. Look at verse 27. After 2 years went by in this way, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and because Felix wanted to gain favor with the Jewish people, he left Paul where? In prison. Oh, for how long? We learned this last week. 2 years. What did Paul do? What had he done? Nothing. You know, you can learn a lot about people when you give them a little bit of authority, a little bit of power. Watch their character creep out. And that's what we see here with Felix. He has a little bit of power. I'm going to show you, Paul, I'm leaving you in jail. It was an incredible city. And that jail is just before you walked up into his palace. So every day he went to work, we would say, "Hey, Paul, how's it going down there?" What was it like? Here's the next picture. I have had fun climbing around inside of this. You don't get the real sense of depth because you're walking down, and maybe you can make this out. You see the tunnel, and then there's tremendous depth from here to the door in which Paul was kept in a dingy tunnel, and on the other side of that is the sea, and it's to this day, the water keeps creeping in. 2 years, is that how you want to spend your life? He occasionally got to come up and meet with the authorities, but then they'd shuttle him back down there. That's a terrible way to spend your life when you haven't done anything wrong. So what happens at this point, Felix was not a good person. All the historians of the time say he was a brutal man. He enjoyed power, he enjoyed popularity, and he enjoyed prestige. And he would do anything to hold on to his position. It goes bad for him because he creates a lot of trouble within the area that Rome has put him there to take care of it, so there is no trouble. He creates trouble on his own. I'll talk about that in a little bit. They recall him, so they have to put another government official into his place. We see this in America all the time. One politician may have done a good job. Recently, we've seen a lot of poor politicians on every level. They're recalled, they're voted out, and then you get to be the next guy in. Would you want to do that? You want to follow somebody's screw-ups? Well, this is what happens here. In chapter 25 now, we see Paul, he's interacting with this new Roman official. He's not a governor, he's a procurator. And it's a person who strictly, as Americans, we can understand that, he is a lifetime politician. He has no real experience with a job. He doesn't understand the military, although he's in the midst of a very hot, tempered group of people. And he shows up and he immediately has to learn day one what's going on. Would you want that job? It's never fun to replace somebody that's been a screw-up, somebody that's made a mess out of everything. So this guy's name is Porcius Festus. We know him as the name Festus. This procurator, he's in charge basically of finances and administration. He's a pencil pusher, okay? Career politician. Normally these people, because they come from Rome, they jump on a ship, they get off, they've got their little satchel. Day one, this person probably doesn't even know where this province exists. And they've just been shipped there. Even if they knew, oh, Judea, that's over that way on the Mediterranean. He knows nothing of the history of what's been going on there. Why? He's a Rome boy. He grew up in the Roman baths. That's all he knows. So when we think of this Festus, and now he's got to interact with the Apostle Paul, you go from a brutal dictator to an inept, many times, or at least a very passive politician. But isn't that life? Can't life change that way? Can't your boss at work be fired and a new boss come in? And then you go, the old guy didn't look so bad. Kids graduate from high school all the time. They thought they had it bad in high school. Then they have to go to college where you're actually maybe paying for your education. Then you realize high school wasn't so bad. Mom and dad weren't so bad. Sometimes it works out where they're good. But this is a situation, it's a total change. Verses 1 through 12 are what we're looking at today. We're looking at the first half of this because it deals primarily with this Porcius Festus. Later, next week, we'll look at the latter half of this chapter and chapter 26 because now Festus has to meet this king dude. His name's King Herod. Does that name ring a bell? Herod Agrippa II. So we're going to combo them and finish this next week. Verse 1, with me? It says, 3 days after Festus arrived in Caesarea. Now, he's a Roman boy. He's used to having dry what? Land. This may have been the first time he's ever gone across the sea. We're not talking a lake, we're talking a sea. Mediterranean can be a very rough body of water. So I don't know if you get seasick. Anybody here, you're notorious at being seasick? Okay, a few of you. Not a fun experience. So when you get off the boat back onto dry land, it takes you a day or two. So Festus arrived in Caesarea, this magnificent city, to take over his new responsibility. But notice a smart thing that he does. He doesn't just camp out there. He says he leaves for where? Jerusalem, the religious hub. So give kudos to him at this point. He gets his legs under him, catches his breath, says, now I got to get about my duties. Positive note. This is a guy that maybe has a little something on the ball. Verse 2. Jerusalem, where the leading priests and other Jewish leaders met him. So he arrives in Jerusalem. Hey, I'm the new leader of this province for Rome. And now they're in his face. They're like that little old lady grabbing at him, pulling on him, yelling at him. It says, and made their accusations against who? Against Paul. Is that the way you want to be greeted for your first day on the job? Hear every problem? Hear about every bad person that there is in the organization? Historians tell us that Festus actually, while he was passive, inept in the sense that he just didn't have any real leading ability in that realm, he was a decent guy. That's what all the historians say. He's a good guy, basically. And he did have some potential as a leader. Now, what do we actually know about this Festus? Not much, because 2 years later he's dead. It didn't last long. The only thing historians really help us to understand, his big moment is right here. This is it. This is what he's known for. For 2,000 years, his interaction with the Apostle Paul. And I always say to myself, so, what will I be known for after I'm gone? And you should ask yourself the same question. Who's going to remember you? And what you accomplished, and what your heartbeat was, and what your passions were, and what difference you made. Will anybody remember? Will anybody even care? Well, Festus has been remembered longer than most of us, and what he did in 2 years. Think on that. God tends to remember people who make a difference or who really fouled up. You will be remembered for one of those two things with your life. Nobody remembers passive, bland, boring people. Would that be true? Think of your history books. In this village, there was 999 people. Here are their names. They did absolutely nothing while they were alive. How many times have you ever read that in the book? You remember the people who were mean and vicious and screw up, and you remember the people who made a real difference. Festus is remembered for something. He's suddenly given Felix's mess dumped upon him. Felix was a former slave, promoted by the Caesar, Claudius Caesar, into his title. He was a slave who somehow maneuvered. When I talk about people who maneuver, is that always a positive term? He maneuvered his way from being a slave to being a Roman official in a province of the Roman Empire. I ask myself, what did he do to accomplish that? It's probably never very good. The great Roman historian of this era said, Tacitus said he was ambitious, he was greedy, he was horribly immoral, and had no scruples. Do you want that on your resume? But Rome would take a person like that, because all you have to do is go into this area, run it for us, don't let there be any trouble. He messed up on that end. He created his own trouble. Tacitus wrote, he exercised the prerogatives of a king. He acted like a king with the spirit and mentality of a slave. That's Felix has been remembered for 2,000 years that way. One of the really bad dudes back in that time. He hired a bunch of people to kill the Jewish high priest. Now, it'd be like here. Somebody hired a bunch of people to come in and kill your pastor. You go, oh, well. But they killed the Jewish high priest. Now, what you know about Christianity and Judaism, is that a good thing? If you're a Jewish person, what does that say to you? The fight, the fist comes up. He sided with the pagan people in the cities of Caesarea against all the Jewish people, and literally had hundreds of Jewish people slaughtered in the streets as he watched to prove to the pagan people that he was on their side. If you're Jewish, are you liking that? That was Felix. You're Festus now. You got to come in and somehow smooth things over. That's a term American. Let's just smooth this over. Yeah, some things aren't smooth over. And then for Americans can relate to, Caesar heard about this. There was enough trouble going on. He voted him off the island. Does that make sense? He removed Felix from the situation. Now you're Festus. I keep saying that. Now you're Festus. You got to deal with this. First thing he does, he goes to Jerusalem, schmooze the people, try to make things right. How would you do that? Knowing just what I told you. How would you go to the Jewish people and say, okay, that was the other guy, but I'm different. Thank you for saying the word different. You're the Jewish people. Are you going to buy into that? And how long will it take you to buy into that? What would I have to do to earn your trust after what the other guy did? Keep thinking all these thoughts. Now he has to deal with the Apostle Paul situation. He doesn't even know who Paul is. He may have heard of him, but not likely, not very much. And the whole Christian thing, it's all new. He doesn't understand. How long does it take you to learn something? The backdrop of the situation. So here's a question for you to think about. If we just read those verses today, verses 1 and 2, and went home, have you ever had to deal with or try to fix someone else's mess in your life? Sometimes it's a little what? Little mess. Other times it's a great big, say it, that's a mess. Where do you start? And it's different if you just can go there and can be indifferent and throw out an idea, turn around, walk home. But when the buck stops here, your reputation is on line here. Your future, your life, it's all on the line. That if you don't get this right, Felix was voted off, chances are worse will happen to you. Because the Roman Caesar will go, all right, can't I get anybody to do this? We learn a tremendous truth here in verses 1 and 2. This may help you someday. When you have to clean up somebody else's mess, here's the lesson. Information gathering before decision making. You might want to write that down. Information gathering before what? Decision making. Don't just go and start kicking things over, and just because you think you've got power or you're a little smarter than the average bear, that you can resolve all the problems that have gone on for decades. Now, America, wake up. Do we really think that we can fix the Middle East? Politicians seem to think so. It's gone on for how many years? I don't know that we even got enough zeros in our calculator. That stuff's been going on forever, and now we're going to come in a lot of situations. We throw money. We pass laws and edicts, and the problem keeps existing because we didn't properly understand the backdrop before we started making what? Decisions. We have to be aware of all the agendas involved. You see, the agendas of the Jewish leaders was to kill Paul. Paul's agenda was, hey, I've done nothing. I just want to go out and be free. You've got to understand the agendas of the various groups and or people before you start passing edicts. Moms and dads, this would save you a whole lot of heartache down the road raising children. Remember, learn the story before you start trying to solve the struggles. That takes time. Meanwhile, there's squabbling. But if you arrive at the wrong assumption, you will make the wrong decision. So be aware of the agendas. A slow, cautious approach is better than knee-jerk reactions. Would you agree? Because you can still make course corrections if you're going slow. If you're going too fast, usually there's a wall of some kind called reality that you're going to hit. And another thing as we think about this principle, a change in environment can reduce tension. He has gone from Caesarea, he's now gone to Jerusalem, hotbed, squabbling, yelling, screaming, little old ladies trying to get the baseball. So what does he do? He removes himself, says, you all are coming back here to where it's my territory, a neutral ground. We're all going to kind of count to 10 and let it diffuse. Sometimes a change of environment is all that's needed to cool down a situation. Agree? Need to think about it because we're all going to be confronted with those situations. When we look in this section, we looked at verses 1 and 2. We see that there's this problem going on. You can read verses 3 through 5, common sense principles that he follows through, those things I just talked about. Now look at verses 6 through 8. 2 years, Paul's been in this damp, dingy, dark hole in the ground underneath the palace. Verse 6, after 8 or 10 days later, Festus returned to Caesarea. He's listened to all this stuff. He returns, and on the following day, he took his seat. Some versions say he sat in the judgment seat, and he ordered that Paul be brought in. There's a time when we have to sit down and we say, now we deal with the situation. Now's decision time. And the seat that he sits in, notice it says his seat or the judgment seat. Nobody else got to sit there. It's Festus' seat. He's the one in charge. There's a time when we just have to say the buck stops here as a parent. Okay, the squabbling has to stop. A decision has to be made. Who's in charge? That person needs to take the authority. He ordered that Paul be brought in. Verse 7, when Paul arrived, Jewish leaders from Jerusalem gathered around, made many serious accusations. They couldn't, what? Prove. Paul denied the charges. I am not guilty of any crime against the Jewish laws or the temple or the Roman government, he said. Notice that Festus sat in his seat, the seat of judgment. He had the power. Notice this. The Jewish leaders had the floor. This is very important when you read the Scripture. You analyze what it is telling you. You analyze what it's not telling you, and you look at what are the implications implied here. He sat in the judgment seat. I've got the authority, no one else does. But where's all the mouthing coming from? The little old lady who's run down there, grabbing at everybody. Okay? He has the power. They have the floor. What's Paul got? He has the evidence. And you'll see this next week. He has his integrity. He can either respond as a Christian or he can react like your pastor would, double up his fist. And he also has his God over the seat that Festus is sitting in. Never forget this in the middle of a conflict. That's what you've got. You've got truth or evidence. You've got your own character, your integrity, and you've got God on your side. And we all want to double our fist and take control, don't we? It's at this point where our faith, the reality of our faith, is evidence to other people. This is where I say, are you simply religious? Religious people double up and punch somebody, and then they justify it. Christians may double up, but then they realize, okay, God, your fist is bigger than mine, and if anybody's going to get a whacking, watch this, I'll let you do it. You see the difference between a person who's a Christian, a person who's religious? Religious people do what they want to do. Christians do what Jesus wants them to do, even though it's stinking hard to live that way. Look at verse 9. But now we see a chink in the armor. Festus had the potential to be a good leader. Sadly, he didn't live long enough. Now, what you see there is, what do you see in the right portion of the picture? Can you make it out? It's a dude looking in a mirror. What's the problem with the mirror? It's cracked. There's a crack in his character. There's a flaw. Verse 9. Festus, watch the next few words, wishing to do the Jews a favor. The Jews are the little old lady in the sweater, pulling and yelling and screaming, accusing. He wants to do them a favor. And you got to ask yourself, why? And we're all going to justify, well, he's new on the job. He doesn't want to offend anybody. But he's taking the truth and he's setting it aside. He wants to make the bad people happy. And he says to Paul, are you willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there on these charges? Now think about it. He just came here, Caesarea, stayed 3 days. He went over here. He's over here about 8 days. Here's all this stuff. Says, no, we're going back here and figure out what's going on. Why would he then say, let's go there and let them try you? Why would he do that? And does that make any sense to anybody here? Why would he say to Paul, do you want to go back there and have them be your critics and your judge and your jury? Why would he say that? Bizarro, because he's trying to make them. He's not trying to make Paul happy. Who's he trying to make happy? The multitude. The people who squeal the loudest. So often we do that. We want to calm them down and disregard truth and the things that are right. We do that in America all the time in our government. All you got to do is carry flags, right? Burn a few cars, smash and grab some stores, complain about something. Doesn't the government come and help you out? Sure they do. Who rebuilds those cities? Not the people who burned everything up. We're all the time trying to pacify the ugly people in our culture, just so that they will go away. And hear me, do they ever? What are they accusing Israel of? All these crimes. And when does the media ever talk about the 1,200 people that were slaughtered? They don't. They talk about genocide, unproven claims. And this is all you have to do is read. Go to a few Arab websites and you see their strategy is to just raise false claims until the media buys into it. There's no truth in what they're saying. They're the ones that started this conflict. But now, let's just make it all go away. Let's give them what they want. And will they go away? Have they in 2,000 years? And I wonder, why would Festus say to Paul, hey, Paul, you want to go back here? Maybe he knew that they were trying to kill him. 2 years later, they're still trying to kill Paul. Why would he say to Paul, if he knew that, why would he take Paul there? Doesn't that make him a bad guy? Yes? Are you tracking? Why would he do that? Maybe he really didn't understand the situation and he honestly is just trying to make the Jews happy. Either way, he's wrong. Either way, truth's being set aside. He's what we call a people pleaser. He's trying to make people happy at the expense of the innocent and trying to make people and trying to pacify them and do away with truth. Paul had done nothing wrong. 4 basic responses when we come to conflict and stress, and this is a stressful situation. He could fight, he could flee or flight. Third one is freeze or fawn. You don't hear much about that. The fawn approach is whatever. Maybe they'll go away. Just give them the ball back. Just let them be quiet. And none of those work. None of those are really good options. Those are strategies to deal with stress. That's what non-Christians do. They manifest those in their life. Sometimes it's a combination. All of us have grown up learning that from our parents, our school system, from the people we work with, from our neighbors, any social interactions with people. We have adopted those. Those are of the world. That's how the world responds to stress and to conflict. People justify that fawn thing, just make them happy. They say, well, I'm just being selfless. I'm just giving. I'm trying to be kind. Man, it irks me when people say that. I'm just trying to be kind, make people happy. I'm trying to show compassion and understanding on without realizing their character. To an excess, and it's nice to be kind and compassionate. I'm not saying that's bad. But when that is your default, to just make them go away, there's something wrong with that picture. The motive then is about you. It's about making you happy. It's about making your life easier. It's not dealing with the truth or dealing with the negative behavior of these people. It's all about who? And that's wrong when you make it all about you. A Christian should find their identity in God. They should understand who they are. I don't have to live this way. And we should stand for truth in all situations, not default to make ourselves better and make another person worse. Does that ring a bell? Does that make sense? People-pleasing, psychologists tell us in writings that I've looked at this week, they say to a heavy extent, when a person, we categorize them, yeah, that's a real people pleaser. In the Christian realm, that is viewed as idolatry. That's a form of idolatry. Well, idolatry, I'm a Christian. How's that idolatry? Because you are promoting self over and above God and who God says you are and God's truth. You have made your image of what is right and wrong to be the deciding factor. That, folks, is, what's the word? It's idolatry. Look at verse 10 through 12. We see Paul doing something that I've known people in my life that will never stand up for themselves. They would take that freeze or the flight response. Look at Paul, verse 10. But Paul replied, What's the word? Sometimes as a Christian, whether it's the government, whether it's your family, whether it's your peer group, whether it's your school, whether it's your workplace, we need to look them in the eye and say, nay, nay. We need to say, no. Truth is truth. Right is right. No, this is the official Roman court, so I ought to be tried right here. I'm not going there and get beat up or killed. You know very well I am not guilty of harming the Jews. He stands up for himself. It takes guts to stand up for yourself, especially when there's a bunch of people like that little old lady trying to pull at you and grab you and embarrass you in front of national audience. Verse 11. If I have done something worthy of death, notice this. I've said this before. If you're going to stand up for yourself, stand up for your faith, stand up for your country, it will probably cost you. And you have to be willing to take the consequences. It says here, you know very well I'm not guilty of harming the Jews. Verse 11, if I've done anything worthy of death, I don't refuse to die. I'll pay the price. But if I am innocent, no one has a right. I love Paul. Stood up for himself, stood up for the faith, stood up for Jesus. No one has the right to turn me over these men to kill me. I appeal to Caesar. Festus conferred with his advisors. You can see him do it. Because you got all the Jews there simmering. What's going to happen? And then he replied, very well. This again tells us a little something about Festus. He's not a total bad guy. He's just a weak person. Can't stand up to the crowd. He'd rather please them. But he does know the law very well. You've appealed to Caesar, and to Caesar you will go. This is the right of every Roman citizen. I can't imagine this was the case in America. This is the right of every Roman citizen. That if they were in a trial and they felt they were not getting the answer they wanted to, they could keep going up the food chain. In America, we have a court system that is based upon Roman law. Do you realize that? And the highest legal system in our country is called what? Supreme Court. So Paul decides, I'm going to Rome, and I'm going to talk to Caesar. Now, can you imagine? You get a traffic ticket. And you say, I don't like this traffic ticket. I don't think it's fair. Cop says you got to appear at the court. So you go to district court, you go to circuit court, whatever the system is. You go to the appeals court, you go to the state court. Wouldn't it be cool to say, okay, I'm going to represent myself in front of the Supreme Court, and you don't even need a lawyer. You get to go. I'm going, how did the Roman system work like? Because usually the person got bought off, killed off, or died off before they ever would get to Caesar. Now here's the deal. He wants to go Caesar. Okay, that sounds good, Paul. You're right. What Caesar are you going to see? You ready? His name's Nero. Never hear of Emperor Nero? Okay, that's the image we have of Nero fiddling while Rome burns, and he blames it all on Christians. He'd said, I'd rather take my chances with that maniac than I would with all of you people. And off he goes. This is how this section of the chapter ends. It ended poorly because we have a people pleaser who could not say he's innocent, he's done nothing wrong, I'll let him go. He's trying to make all sides happy. That never works in any situation. So you're going to go home today, and you're going to remember something. And I have no clue what it is. You don't realize until you go home and think about this. You have received so much truth today that it would take you the rest of the week just to process many of the points that I talked about on how you respond or do you react. Which of those four ways do you respond or react to stress? Are you a people, what's the word? Are you a people pleaser? Well, we all are, but are you a chronic people pleaser? where you compromise truth, where you abandon character, where it's more about you than the situation. You got a lot of stuff to think about. So let me help you as you go home. Here's the first thing. You got 5 areas, a checklist, if you will, of application. All of this does not apply to your life. Some of it does apply to your life. So here's the first one. The world and life are not usually fair. Have you figured that out? Huh? So the question is, how do you respond to it? Here's what I say to you as your loving, caring pastor. Suck it up, Buttercup. You're not entitled to anything in this life, and you're surely not entitled to have an easy life or a good life or a stress-free life. There are people here who just accumulate stress, and you melt down and you're a little puddle, and your friends and family are all the time trying to, get a little broom and a little dustpan. They're trying to pick you up all the time, reassemble you like you're the egg that fell off the king's wall. There are others of us that love to give you stress. There are people who carry stress, and there are stress producers. Can you figure out who you are? Look at your spouse. I'll bet you've got one of each. Okay? Sometimes you're lucky if you're both the people that produce stress. I pity the fool who is your child. All right? You got to suck it up. That's life. You have a choice on how you respond or whether you're going to just react negatively. Agreed? Look at number 2. So sometimes you just got to say, all right, I got to quit being a big baby here and just got to deal with the situation and deal with it in a godly way. Number 2, a nation that honors God has a greater likelihood of having a justice system that we can count on. Think about that. As long as America, we can encourage people to vote God's values. Notice, you did not hear me say a political party or a candidate. Is that correct? We've had people get all upset at this church and leave because you're always talking politics. No, I'm talking morality, fool. They're no longer here. All right? As long as we talk about God's policies, God's values, and vote those, we will have a good country where we can hope to have some degree of fairness in our laws and in our justice system. Agreed? November's coming. If you vote for your pocketbook, you vote for your wallet, you vote for your best friend's ideas, you vote for some stupid union, their choice, you're not acting like a follower of Christ. You look at your Bible and then you look at what the various political stances are. You say, who most aligns with God? Because nobody will totally align. Agreed? That's your role to keep our government and our country going down a good path. Not a godly path, but a good path that honors the Lord in some capacity. Number 3, people-pleasing is not a positive trait. It is not. And in its worst form, it is idolatry. Because you exalt your opinion and your self-protection over everybody else and even over who God says He is, who you are, and what the truth is. I'm not talking about being kind, compassionate, and thoughtful. We're talking to the excess, where it is just your nature to try to fix everything and make everyone happy. Number 4, sometimes in life, all we have is the truth. Our integrity, our character, and our relationship with God. Remember Paul? That's all he had. Sometimes that's got to be good enough for you. And if the world decides to beat you up and take away your baseball, it happens. But you can't compromise your faith to make other people happy. You have to stand for who you are. I love verses 10 through 12 where Paul stands up and he says, nay, nay. Number 5, Judgment Day is going to set everything right. Well, I don't think life's fair. I think they mistreated me. I think it should have happened this way. Jesus is up in heaven with a little angel who took typing class 101 back in 7th grade, and they're listing all the stuff down. Okay? You don't have to make everything right. That's his job. Your job is to act right. Did you catch that? You don't have to make things right. Your job's to act right in spite of how life treats you. But you're never called as a Christian to be a doormat. There you go. Ask yourself, what am I going to do with what I've heard? I'm glad you asked that question. Because at your table, you've got a couple minutes where I'd like you to do that. If you heard one thing today, I don't expect you all to agree with me. That'd be like insane. Make me happy, but what one thing did God say to you, or that you've heard that you say, I need to think more about that. I need to consider that. I need to maybe look into that more. All right? You got a couple minutes to do that. All right. This month of September that we've entered, for 4 weeks we're going to be talking about ministry at the end of the service and having us think about and praying about how we can minister to others. If I serve somebody, I simply bring them a jar and I put it there. I could throw it like that. I could have a good attitude. I could put it down. I could say thank you and all that. But non-Christians can serve. There's nothing wrong with service. Service is doing a task. Ministry is where you use some event with the idea of I'm going to try to make a spiritual difference in somebody's life. So I could bring up this, now that they've cleaned it up, and I could set down, here's your pens, guys. And I could, as I do this, I could pray for this table. See, I'm trying to make a spiritual difference in their life. So we're going to have you think about your own home now as you go home. We want you to, your home, whether you live alone, you're in a family, whatever your situation is how can your home begin to make a spiritual difference in the lives of the people that you encounter? That could be your extended family. That could be your neighbors. If you're a student, you could say, my home is not the house I live in. My home is my school, because that's where I spend most of my time. How can you this week, just this week, as a family, as a person, as a couple, begin to make a difference where you're located? And you may go home and say, you know what, we're going to just write down the names of some of the neighbors that we know, and this week, each day, we're going to pray for one of them. Does that make sense? You could go home and make tacos for a neighbor who lives a little ways from you, and show up at their house and give them a taco or cookies or take them out to eat. You see a neighbor that's doing something outside. You could go over and offer to help them or just talk with them. There's all kinds of ways we can make a spiritual difference, but if we don't think about it, what's the likelihood we'll get to it? You're not going to. That's your project as you go home. Besides thinking through some of this heavy stuff I talked about, how can you begin to make a, what's the key word? Difference in somebody else's life. All right? So right now, at your table, 1 minute, just pray, God, give me some wisdom in this area, how I can make a difference, and then I'll close out. Father, this week as we go home, help us to strategize different ways of impacting people's lives. It could just be giving our neighbor a smile. It could be helping them. It could be praying for them. It could be talking to them, helping them if they're dealing with something emotional or financial, whatever. But just don't let us be the same people that we were when we walked in here. Energize us. Energize our hearts, our minds to be different, to be difference makers this week, we pray.